Cale was born under a blood moon. That was the first mistake, though it wasn't hers. The midwife who pulled her from her mother's body had gasped, not at the child's cry, but at the sky. The moon had split open like a wound, red and swollen, casting the stone hut in a light that looked like dried blood on snow. The wind outside had screamed through the pines like something dying. The fire in the hearth had flickered and gone out, as if the air itself had been swallowed. Her mother, Alara, had reached for the infant with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her lips drained of color, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She had whispered something, a single word, soft as falling snow, before her hand fell limp against the furs. She died 3 breaths later. The midwife had stumbled back, crossing herself with shaking fingers. "The old gods have marked this child," she'd whispered. "She carries the blood moon in her veins." The clan elders were summoned immediately. They came wrapped in furs and iron, their faces carved from stone and suspicion. They stood in a circle around the newborn, silent and cold, their eyes fixed on the infant who had not yet opened her own. Thorn, the eldest, had been the first to speak. "The mother is dead. The moon is cursed. The child is the vessel." No one argued. No one questioned. They named her Cale, the Hollow One, and from that night forward, she was marked, not by choice, not by action, but by fear. Cale's earliest memory was of cold, not the cold of winter, though the clan's territory was buried in snow for half the year, not the cold of wind or frost or frozen rivers, the cold of absence. She was 3 years old the first time she realized no one wanted to touch her. Her father, Orvin, had been a hunter, tall, broad-shouldered, with hands scarred from years of skinning pelts and carving bone. He had tried in the beginning to care for her. He had fed her, kept her warm, spoken to her in the low, steady voice he used to calm spooked animals. But the clan's whispers were louder than his love. By the time Cale was 5, Orvin no longer picked her up when she cried. By the time she was 7, he stopped saying her name. By the time she was 10, he had stopped looking at her altogether. Kyle learned quickly that survival meant silence. She learned to walk along the edges of rooms, to keep her head down, to make herself as small and forgettable as possible. She learned that if she didn't speak, people wouldn't remember she was there, and if they didn't remember, they couldn't hurt her. The other children were worse than the adults. They threw stones when the elders weren't looking. They spat at her feet. They whispered blood moon girl and curse carrier, and dead mother's ghost whenever she passed. Once, when she was 8, a boy named Harrow had shoved her into the freezing creek that ran through the village. She had gasped, choking on icy water, her lungs burning, her fingers clawing at the rocks. No one had helped her. Orvin had been standing on the bank, watching. He had turned away. Kyle had pulled herself out, shivering and sobbing, and walked back to the hut alone. That night, she stopped crying. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself she didn't need them. She told herself she was strong enough to survive alone, but some lies are too heavy to carry forever. Before we begin this journey into one of the coldest and most emotional stories of fate and rebirth, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if this is your first time on our channel, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear is a story that legends tried to hide, but memory refused to forget. By the time Cale turned 16, she had learned to survive on scraps. She foraged in the forest when no one was looking. Mushrooms, wild herbs, roots that grew deep beneath the snow. She mended her own clothes with thread she stole from the weaving hut when the women weren't watching. She kept a small fire burning in her hearth with wood she gathered before dawn, when the mist was thick enough to hide her movements. Her father no longer lived in the hut with her. 3 winters ago, he had taken a new wife, a woman named Bryn, from a neighboring clan. Bryn was beautiful, with hair like honey, and a smile that could charm the frost off the trees. But she had one condition before agreeing to marry Orvin. "I will not live under the same roof as that cursed girl." Orvin had agreed without hesitation. He built a new home on the other side of the village, near the clan hall, where the important families lived. He moved his belongings in a single afternoon. He never looked back. Cale told herself it didn't matter. But some nights, when the wind howled through the cracks in the walls and the fire burned low, she still remembered the sound of his voice, the way he used to hum old hunting songs while sharpening his blade, the way he'd once called her Little Ember because of the way her hair caught the firelight. He didn't call her anything now. No one did, except the elders, and when they finally came for her, it was not with kindness. It was deep winter when the council made their decision. The livestock had been dying, sheep found torn apart in the fields, their bodies scattered like broken dolls. 2 hunters had gone missing in the forest, their tracks disappearing into the trees as if the earth itself had swallowed them. The clan was afraid, and fear always needed a name. Kyle had been sitting by her fire, trying to keep warm, when the door to her hut slammed open. 3 elders stood in the threshold, their faces hard as the frozen ground. Thorn, the eldest, was flanked by 2 younger men, Garrick and Voss, both warriors, both carrying iron blades. "Get up," Thorn commanded. His voice was like the scrape of metal on stone. Kale's heart dropped into her stomach. She knew what this meant. She had always known. "The council has decided," Thorn continued. "The beast in the forest has grown restless. The old gods are angry, and we know why." His eyes fixed on her like a blade. "You were born under the blood moon. You carry the mark of ruin. The beast hungers, and you will be the offering that saves us all." Kale's hands trembled. "I've done nothing," she whispered. "You were born," Thorn said coldly. "That is enough." Garrick stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of his blade. "We leave at nightfall. Prepare yourself." Kale wanted to scream, to run, to beg, but she had learned long ago that begging changed nothing. "When?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Tonight." They dragged her into the cold, just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Not with ropes. They wouldn't waste good rope on her, but with hands that gripped too hard, voices that barked orders, eyes that refused to meet hers. The entire village had gathered in the square. Torches burned in a circle, their flames casting long, twisted shadows on the snow. The air smelled of smoke and fear and something else, something that felt like finality. Kyle scanned the crowd, searching for her father. She found him standing near the back, half hidden in the shadows. His new wife, Bryn, stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm. She was whispering something in his ear. Kale's eyes locked with Orvan's. For a single, fragile moment, she thought she saw something in his face. Regret, maybe, or grief, or some distant echo of the man who had once held her as a baby and called her his little Ember. But then Bryn tugged on his arm, and Orvan looked away. Kale's knees buckled. Garrick yanked her upright. "Walk," he hissed. They led her through the village gates, past the last row of huts, and into the forest. The trees here were ancient. Their trunks were thick as houses, their branches twisted and gnarled, reaching toward a sky that had forgotten mercy. The snow was deep, and the cold bit through Kale's thin cloak like teeth. Her breath came in ragged gasps, visible in the freezing air. No one spoke. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on frozen ground, and the distant howl of wind through the pines. They walked for what felt like hours. Finally, they stopped at the edge of a clearing. In the center stood a stone altar, old, cracked, stained with something darker than moss. Symbols were carved into the surface, worn smooth by centuries of snow and rain. Kale didn't recognize them, but they made her skin crawl. "Kneel," Thorn commanded. Kale's legs gave out before she could refuse. The elders formed a circle around her. Thorn stepped forward, raising his hands to the sky. "Old gods," he intoned, his voice echoing through the trees. "Spirits of the ancient world. We offer you this vessel, this cursed one, this child of the blood moon." He lowered his gaze to Kyle. "Take her, and grant us peace." The other elders began to chant. Old words, forgotten words, words that tasted of ash and iron. And then, they left. One by one, they turned and walked back toward the village, their torches fading into the darkness like dying stars. Kale was alone in the snow, alone in the cold, alone with the forest. And something in the forest was watching. She didn't know how long she knelt there. Time felt strange, stretched thin, like a thread about to snap. Her body shook. Her fingers were numb. Her breath came in shallow, broken gasps. The cold was unbearable, a living thing that clawed at her skin, her bones, her lungs. She thought about her mother, about the woman she had never known, the woman who had died bringing her into the world. She thought about her father, about the way he used to smile at her, before the clan convinced him she was poison. She thought about the life she might have had, in a different world, in a different body, under a different moon. And then, she heard it, a sound, not a growl, not a roar, a voice, deep, ancient, wrapped in something that felt older than the trees, older than the snow, older than fear itself. It spoke one word, Kale. Her head snapped up. The forest had gone silent. No wind, no birds, no movement. Only the voice, and from the shadows between the trees, something emerged. It was not a wolf. It was not a man. It was something in between, and something far beyond. The creature was massive, its body cloaked in fur as black as the space between stars. Its eyes glowed like embers in a dying fire, not red, not gold, but something in between, something that looked like molten bronze and ancient flame. Antlers? No, not antlers. Something stranger, something that looked like bone and wood and iron all twisted together, crowned its head, wrapped in vines that seemed to pulse with faint, otherworldly light. It moved with the weight of mountains and the grace of falling snow, and it looked at her, not with hunger, not with rage, with recognition. "Kale," it said again, and this time the word felt like a name she had been waiting her entire life to hear. What did the beast see in her that no one else ever could? Kale couldn't move. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to scramble back, to flee into the trees, to do anything but stay frozen in the snow before this creature that should not exist. But her body refused to obey, because the beast had spoken her name. Not girl, not cursed one, not offering. Kale, her name, as if it had always known her. The creature stepped closer, and the ground trembled beneath its weight. Snow melted where its claws touched the earth, steam rising in pale curls. Its eyes, burning, molten, impossibly alive, never left hers. Kale's voice came out in a broken whisper. "You can speak." The beast tilted its massive head, and something that might have been amusement flickered across its ancient face. "I have always spoken," it said, its voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. "Your kind simply stopped listening." Kale's breath came in short, desperate gasps. Her mind was spinning, trying to reconcile the stories she'd been told her entire life with the reality standing before her. "They said you were a monster," she whispered. "A curse. That you killed without mercy." "I do," the beast interrupted calmly. "When I must." It lowered its head, bringing its face level with hers. She could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell the scent of old wood and winter moss and something else, something that felt like memory, like time itself. "But I do not kill for sport," it continued, its voice softer now, "and I do not kill the innocent." Its eyes searched hers, not with the cold calculation of a predator, but with something that looked almost like concern. "Tell me, Kyle, what crime have you committed?" The question shattered something inside her. She had spent 16 years asking herself the same thing. What had she done? What sin had she carried? What curse had she borne that made her unworthy of love, of safety, of a single kind word from the people who were supposed to protect her? "I was born," she said, her voice cracking. "That's all. I was just born." The beast's eyes flared with something that looked like rage, not at her, but for her. "That is not a crime." Kyle's throat tightened. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she forced them back. She had learned long ago that crying changed nothing. Tears didn't make people kinder. They didn't make the stones hurt less. They didn't bring back the dead. "It is to them," she said bitterly. The beast was silent for a long moment, its gaze never wavering. Then it spoke again, softer now, but no less powerful. "They sent you here to die." It wasn't a question. Kale nodded, her hands clenched into fists in the snow. "They believe your death will save them," the beast continued. "That offering you to me will lift some imagined curse, that your blood will wash away their fear." "Yes." The creature's gaze darkened, its eyes burning brighter. "Fools," it growled, and the word carried the weight of centuries. "They do not understand what they have done." Kyle frowned, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The beast straightened, rising to its full, towering height. Its antlers scraped the low-hanging branches, and frost fell like broken glass. "You are not a curse, Kale," it said. "You are a key." Her heart stuttered. "A key to what?" The beast turned, its massive body moving with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large. "Come," it said. "If you wish to live, if you wish to understand, you will follow me." Kale didn't move. Every rational part of her mind was screaming that this was madness, that following a creature of legend into the depths of the forest was a death sentence. But then again, she was already supposed to be dead. "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice steadier now. The beast glanced back at her, and for the first time, she saw something almost like sadness in its burning eyes. "Then you will freeze, and your people will believe they were right, and you will die, nameless, and forgotten, as they always intended. It began to walk into the forest, its massive form disappearing into the shadows between the trees. Kyle looked back toward the village, toward the torches that had abandoned her, toward the father who had turned away, toward the clan that had never wanted her, toward the life that had never been hers. And then she stood. Her legs were shaking. Her body was numb from the cold, but she stood, and she followed the beast. The forest changed as they walked deeper. The trees grew taller, older, their bark covered in patterns that looked almost like writing. The snow beneath her feet felt softer somehow, as if the earth itself was cushioning her steps. The cold no longer bit at her skin with the same vicious intensity. It was as if the forest recognized the creature she was following, and somehow recognized her too. "Where are we going?" Kale asked, her voice barely louder than the wind. The beast turned, did not slow its steady pace. "To the place your people forgot," it said. "To the place they tried to erase from their history and their hearts." Kale's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "You will." They walked in silence after that. The only sounds the soft crunch of snow and the distant whisper of wind through the ancient pines. Kale's mind raced with questions, but something told her to wait, to let this strange creature guide her to whatever truth it wanted her to see. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged into a clearing, and Kale stopped breathing. Before her stood the ruins of something magnificent. Stone pillars rose from the snow like the bones of giants, their surfaces carved with intricate symbols and patterns that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Archways framed nothing but sky and stars, yet somehow they felt complete, as if they were doorways to places that existed beyond sight. The carvings were everywhere, spirals and circles, animals and moons, figures that looked half human and half something else. In the center of the ruins stood a pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting the pale moon above like a mirror to another world. The beast moved to the water's edge and lowered its head, its reflection merging with Kale's in the dark surface. "This was a sanctuary," it said quietly, its voice heavy with something that sounded like grief. "Long before your clan claimed these lands, long before they built their walls and their altars and their fear." It looked at her, its eyes reflecting the starlight. This was where the marked ones came to be whole. Kale stepped closer, her legs trembling, her heart hammering in her chest. "Marked ones? Those born under blood moons," the beast explained. "Those touched by the old gods. Those your people now call cursed." The creature's voice grew softer, more sorrowful. "They were not curses, Kyle. They were bridges, between the mortal world and the ancient one, between flesh and spirit, between what is and what could be." Kyle stared at the pool, her own reflection wavering in the still water. She looked different here, somehow. Less broken, less small. "What happened to them?" she whispered. "Your ancestors feared them," the beast said, "and fear is the cruelest executioner. They hunted them, burned them, drowned them in the rivers they once blessed, until there were none left." It turned to face her fully. "You are not the first, Kale, but you are the last." The words hit her like a physical blow. "The last of the marked ones, the last bridge between worlds, the last key to the old magic that once made this land sacred." The beast stepped closer, and its voice dropped to a whisper that felt like thunder in her bones. "And if you die tonight, if you let them win, the door between worlds will close forever, and this forest, this land, everything that was sacred and alive and true, will fade into nothing but stone and silence." Kale's hands shook. Her entire body felt like it was vibrating with something she couldn't name. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why do I matter? I'm nobody. I'm nothing. I'm just—" "You were never meant to be a sacrifice, Kale." The beast lowered its head until its forehead almost touched hers. "You were meant to be a queen." Kale staggered back, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "No," she breathed. "No, that's not. I'm not." "You are," the beast said firmly, its voice resonating through her chest. "Whether you believe it or not." "I'm nothing." Kale's voice cracked, raw and desperate. The words she'd been told her entire life came pouring out like poison. "I'm cursed. I'm broken. I'm the reason my mother died." "You are alive," the beast interrupted, its voice sharp as winter wind. "And that alone is more than they ever gave you credit for." Tears finally broke free, hot against her frozen cheeks. "They hate me," she whispered. "My own father won't even look at me. The entire clan. They wanted me dead. They still want me dead. How can I be anything more than what they say I am? The beast was quiet for a moment, studying her with those ancient burning eyes. Then it spoke, and its voice was gentler than she'd heard yet. Tell me, Kale, when a tree is planted in poisoned soil, and its roots are cut, and its branches are broken, and still it grows, is the tree weak? Kale blinked, confused. No, but I'm not a tree. You are alive, the beast repeated, despite everything they did to destroy you. Despite the cold and the hunger and the loneliness, despite being told every day of your life that you were worthless, you are still here, still breathing, still standing. It moved closer, its presence overwhelming and warm. That is not weakness, Kale. That is the strongest magic I have ever seen. Kale's chest tightened. She wanted to believe it. Gods, she wanted to believe it so badly it hurt. But I don't feel strong, she whispered. I feel hollow. I know, the beast said softly. And that is why I am going to teach you your true name, the one written in your bones, the one the old gods whispered the night you were born, the one your people tried to bury. Kyle looked up at the creature, her vision blurred with tears. And then, the beast's gaze was steady, unyielding, fierce. And then you will return to them, not as an offering, not as a ghost, but as something they can no longer ignore. It turned toward the ruins, toward the pool that reflected the stars. But first, you must die. Kale's heart stopped. What? Not in body, the beast clarified, its voice echoing through the clearing, but in spirit. You must let go of the girl they made you, the one who apologized for breathing, the one who believed she deserved the cold, the one who carried their shame as if it were her own. The creature moved to the edge of the pool and gestured with one massive claw. Step into the water. Kyle looked at the pool. Dark, still, impossibly deep. The surface was like black glass, reflecting not just the moon, but something else, something deeper, something that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. What will happen? She asked, her voice trembling. You will see what you were always meant to be, the beast said, but I cannot show you. You must choose to see it yourself. Kale's legs felt like lead. Every instinct told her to run, to refuse, to stay safe, but safety had never protected her. Kindness had never saved her. The only thing that had kept her alive was her refusal to give up. So she stepped forward. The water was cold, colder than the snow, colder than the wind, colder than anything she had ever felt in her life. It closed over her feet, her ankles, her knees. She kept walking. The cold burned. Her lungs screamed. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The water reached her waist, her chest, her throat, and then it closed over her head, and the world went dark. Kyle was drowning, not in water, in memory. Every moment of her life played out in flashes, sharp, cruel, unrelenting. She saw her mother's face, pale and still, her hand reaching for a child she would never hold. She saw her father's back as he walked away from her hut, his shoulders hunched, his steps heavy with something that might have been guilt but looked more like relief. She saw the stones thrown at her, the whispers that followed her like shadows, the way people crossed to the other side of the street when they saw her coming. She saw the night the elders came for her, their faces hard and cold, their torches casting long shadows on the snow. She saw the altar, the chanting, the way they had left her to die without a single backward glance, and beneath it all, a voice, not the beast's voice, something older, something that felt like the earth itself speaking. Child of the blood moon, daughter of the in-between, you were not born to be small. Kyle tried to scream, but no sound came. The water, or whatever this was, filled her lungs, her throat, her chest. You were born to stand at the threshold, to hold the door open, to remember what they forgot. The voice wrapped around her like roots, like vines, like something that had been waiting for her since the beginning of time. But you cannot do that as you are. You must be unmade, and remade. And then, pain. Searing, bone-deep, burning through every nerve in her body like liquid fire. She felt herself breaking apart at the seams, felt her bones crack and reform, felt her blood turn to something hotter, brighter, something that sang with power she'd never known existed. She felt herself unraveling, thread by thread, by memory, and by wound. And then, she felt herself reforming. Her blood turned to starlight and iron. Her bones turned to something stronger than stone. Her skin turned to something that felt like moonlight made solid. Her heart that had been broken so many times she thought it could never be whole. Her heart became something new, something fierce, something that beat with the rhythm of ancient drums and forgotten songs. And when she opened her eyes, she was standing in the clearing again, but she was not the same. Kyle looked down at her hands. They were still her hands, but different. Her skin glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. Silver light traced patterns across her palms, spiraling up her arms in designs that looked like the carvings on the ancient stones. Her fingers felt stronger, steadier, capable of things she couldn't yet name. She felt taller, more solid, more real than she had ever felt in her entire life. She looked up at the beast. It was watching her with something that looked like pride, fierce and ancient and impossibly tender. "You have passed through the threshold," it said softly. "You are no longer what they named you." Kale's voice, when it came, was steady, strong. "Then what am I?" The beast's eyes burned like twin stars. "You are Kale, the bridge walker, the doorkeeper, the one who carries the old magic in her veins, the one who will decide whether this land lives or dies." It stepped closer, and its voice dropped to something that felt like a vow. "You are the last of your kind, and you are the first of something new." Kale felt the weight of those words settle into her bones, not as a burden, as a truth. "What happens now?" she asked. The beast's gaze never wavered. "Now, you learn what it means to be unbroken." Kale spent the next days, or weeks, time moved strangely in the forest, learning what she had become. The beast taught her, not always with words, sometimes with silence, sometimes with the way it moved through the trees, commanding the forest without ever raising its voice, sometimes with patience that felt older than mountains. It taught her how to listen to the earth beneath her feet, how to feel the pulse of roots deep underground, the whisper of water through stone, the heartbeat of the forest itself. It taught her how to sense the presence of living things, the deer that moved through the shadows, the foxes that hunted in the moonlight, the birds that nested in the ancient pines. It taught her how to stand without apology, how to speak without fear, how to exist without shrinking. And slowly, painfully, Kale began to understand. She was not cursed. She had never been cursed. She had been powerful, and they had been terrified. One night, as they sat by the pool under a sky full of stars, Kyle finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the beginning. "Why did you call my name?" The beast was silent for a long time, its gaze fixed on the water. Then it spoke, and its voice was heavy with memory. "Because I knew your mother." Kyle's breath caught in her throat. "You... what?" The beast's gaze was distant, as if looking at something far away and long ago. "Her name was Alara. She was marked, just like you, born under a blood moon, gifted with the sight, able to walk between the worlds." Kale's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "She was like me?" "Yes," the beast said softly. "And for a time, her people celebrated her. They came to her for blessings, for healing, for guidance." The creature's voice grew colder, darker. "But then the clan elders wanted to wage war on a neighboring tribe. They wanted Alara to bless their warriors, to call upon the old gods to grant them victory. And she refused." Kale's hands clenched into fists. "Why?" "Because the spirits told her the truth," the beast said. "That the war was built on greed, not justice. That it would bring only death and suffering. That the old gods would not bless slaughter born of pride. She told the elders this, and they called her traitor." Kale felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. "What did they do to her?" The beast's eyes flared with old rage. "They cast her out, stripped her of her place in the clan. And when she was weak, when she was dying giving birth to you," the creature's voice broke, just slightly, "they let her die. They stood by and watched as she bled out on the floor of that hut. And then they took the child she left behind and called it cursed. They blamed you for her death, Kyle, because it was easier than admitting they had murdered her." Kyle couldn't breathe. All her life, she had been told that her mother died because of her, that she had been born wrong, born cursed. But it had been a lie. All of it had been a lie. "They killed her," Kyle whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "And they blamed me." "Yes." The beast looked at her with ancient, knowing eyes. "And that is why I called your name, Kale. Because I promised your mother, in the moments before she died, that if her child survived, if her daughter lived, I would protect her. I would wait for her. And when the time came, I would teach her the truth." Kale's vision blurred with tears, but this time they were not tears of grief. They were tears of fury. "I want to go back," she said, her voice steady and cold as winter steel. The beast tilted its head, studying her. Are you ready? Kale stood, her body thrumming with power she was only beginning to understand. I'm ready. What will happen when the girl they tried to kill walks back through the gates they thought would close forever? The beast walked with her to the edge of the forest, where the ancient trees gave way to the open snowfields that surrounded the village. The sky above was clear and cold, stars scattered like shards of broken ice. The moon, just a crescent now, pale and distant, watched silently. Kale stood at the boundary, staring at the dark silhouette of the village in the distance. Smoke rose from chimneys. Torchlight flickered in windows. Life continued, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't left a 16-year-old girl to die in the snow. They'll be afraid of me, Kale said quietly. Good, the beast replied. Let them feel a fraction of the fear they made you carry your entire life. Kyle glanced up at the creature. This massive, ancient being that had saved her life, had taught her the truth, had given her back the pieces of herself she didn't even know were missing. Will I see you again? The beast's eyes softened. I will always be here, Kyle, in the forest, in the old places, in the spaces between what is and what could be. It lowered its head, and for a moment, Kyle felt the warmth of its presence wrap around her like a promise. But you do not need me anymore. You are whole now. You're awake. Kyle reached out, hesitating for just a moment, then placed her hand on the beast's massive snout. The fur was warm and soft, and beneath it she could feel the steady rhythm of something older than heartbeat, the pulse of the earth itself. Thank you, she whispered. The beast's voice was gentle, almost tender. Go, Kyle. Show them what they tried to destroy. And with that, the creature turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest, disappearing like smoke, like memory, like a dream half-remembered at dawn. Kyle was alone, but this time, the solitude didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like freedom. She walked through the snow with her head high. The cold didn't bite at her anymore. The wind didn't claw. The night didn't frighten her. She was something else now, something that could not be erased. When she reached the village gates, they stood open, just as they had the night the elders dragged her out. Kyle stepped through, and one by one, the sounds of the village stopped. A woman dropping a bucket, a man's axe halting mid-swing, children's laughter cutting off like a severed thread. Heads turned, eyes widened. Someone gasped. Gods above, a voice whispered. It's her. Kyle walked forward, her footsteps steady, her gaze unwavering. She did not shrink. She did not apologize. She did not lower her eyes. The villagers stepped back as she passed, their faces pale, their mouths hanging open in shock, and something that looked dangerously close to terror. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them feel, for once, what it was like to be powerless. Kyle walked straight through the center of the village, heading toward the council hall. Behind her, whispers erupted like wildfire. How is she alive? The beast should have killed her. She's cursed. Look at her eyes. What is she? Kyle didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her presence was answer enough. Roan had been sharpening his blade near the forge when the whispers started. At first, he thought it was another rumor, another ghost story the elders told to keep people in line, another way for the clan to distract themselves from the guilt that hung over the village like a shroud. But then he saw her. Kyle, the girl they had sacrificed. The girl who was supposed to be dead. She was walking through the square, alone, and she looked different, stronger, taller. There was something in the way she moved, not the hunched, fearful shuffle of the girl he remembered, but a steady, deliberate stride that seemed to command the very ground beneath her feet. Her skin seemed to glow faintly in the torchlight, as if she carried her own inner fire. Her eyes, God's, her eyes, were no longer the dull, defeated brown he remembered. They burned with something fierce and ancient and utterly unstoppable. Roan's chest tightened painfully. He had been there that night. He had been one of the warriors who escorted her to the forest, one of the ones who stood in the circle while the elders chanted their prayers and left her to die. He had been one of the ones who walked away, and he had hated himself for it every single day since. He'd told himself it was necessary, that the clan came first, that sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. But late at night, when he lay awake staring at the ceiling of his hut, he heard her voice, quiet, broken. When? And he heard his own silence in response. Now she was here, alive, and walking toward the council hall like she owned the very air she breathed. Kale's gaze swept across the crowd, and when it landed on Roan, He felt it like a blade. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. He heard her anyway. You left me. Rowan forced himself to step forward, his heart hammering in his chest. Kyle, he said, his voice rough. She stopped, turned, looked at him. And for the first time in his life, Rowan understood what it meant to be truly seen. Not as a warrior, not as the alpha's son, not as someone strong or capable or worthy, but as exactly what he was, a coward. How are you alive? He asked, though the question felt foolish the moment it left his lips. Kale's smile was cold, sharp as winter, because the beast is not what you think it is. And then she turned away and continued walking toward the council hall. Rowan stood frozen, watching her go, something hot and painful burning in his chest. He had failed her. He had abandoned her. And now she was back, and he had no idea how to make it right. The council hall was full. Every elder, every warrior, every soul in the village who could walk had crowded inside, packed shoulder to shoulder, whispering and murmuring and staring at the girl who should not be alive. Kale stood in the center of the room, alone. The elders sat at the head table, their faces carved from stone. Thorn sat in the middle, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Thorn broke the silence. You should not be here. His voice was cold, flat, emotionless. Kale's voice was calm, steady, unbreakable. I was born here. I have more right to be here than you do. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Thorn's eyes narrowed. You were an offering, a sacrifice. The beast, Kale interrupted, her voice ringing clear through the hall, is not a monster. Silence. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. It is a guardian, Kale continued, the last of its kind. And it has been protecting this land for centuries. Long before you claimed it, long before you built your walls, long before you turned fear into faith. She stepped closer to the table. And you tried to kill me because you were afraid. Thorn stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. You were marked, he said, his voice hard. Born under a blood moon. A curse. I was not a curse. Kale's voice cracked like thunder through the hall. I was a bridge. Between this world and the old one. Between the living and the sacred. Between what was and what could still be. She looked at every face in the room. Every elder, every warrior, every villager who had turned their backs on her. And you were too afraid to see it. Her gaze found her father, standing near the back of the room, half hidden in shadow. Orvin looked away. Kale's voice softened, but the pain in it was sharp enough to cut. I was your daughter. The words hung in the air like smoke. Orvin's shoulders trembled, but he didn't speak, didn't move, didn't look at her. Kale turned back to the council. But I am not here for your apologies. I am not here for your guilt. She straightened, and the silver light beneath her skin pulsed brighter. I am here to tell you the truth. And she told them everything. About the sanctuary in the forest. About the marked ones who had been murdered. About the old magic that once lived in the land. The magic that her people had destroyed out of fear and ignorance. She told them about her mother. About Alara, who had been marked just like her. Who had refused to bless an unjust war. Who had been cast out and left to die. Because she had told the truth. She told them about the beast. The guardian who had protected the land for longer than any of them could imagine, who had saved her life, who had taught her what she truly was. When she finished, the hall was silent. Not the silence of peace, the silence of reckoning. Thorn's face was pale, his jaw clenched. And what would you have us do? He asked finally, his voice tight. Kale's gaze was steady, unyielding. Remember, honor the old ways. Stop killing what you don't understand. She paused. And never, never offer another child to the forest again. What will the elders choose? Truth or the comfortable lie they've been living? The days following Kale's return were tense. The village was divided. Some believed her, others refused. Some wanted to drive her out again. Others wanted answers. But no one could deny what they'd seen. She was alive. She was strong. And she carried something in her that none of them could explain. Rowan found her 3 nights later, sitting on the edge of the forest, staring into the trees. He approached slowly, carefully, as if she were something wild that might bolt if startled. Kale, he said quietly. She didn't turn. Why are you here, Rowan? He sat beside her, keeping a careful distance, and stared out at the dark line of trees. Because I need to say something. Then say it. He took a breath. I'm sorry. Kale laughed, but it was not a kind sound. Sorry, she repeated. That's it? No, Roan said quickly. It's not enough. I know it's not. He clenched his fists, frustration and guilt warring in his chest. I was there that night. I stood there while they took you. I watched them leave you in the cold, and I didn't do anything. His voice cracked. I didn't stop them. I didn't speak up. I just walked away, like you didn't matter. Your life was worth less than my comfort. Kyle finally looked at him, and her eyes were blazing. You did. Roan's throat tightened. I know. You let them kill me. I know. You're a coward. I know. Kyle studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, and her voice was softer than he expected. But you came back. Roan frowned. What? You came back, she repeated. You stood in that hall. You listened. You didn't leave. She turned to face him fully. Most of them still want me gone. Most of them still think I'm cursed. But you stayed. Roan's chest ached with something he couldn't name. I will stay, he said, his voice raw. For as long as you'll let me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. But I swear to you, Kyle, I will never walk away again. Kale's gaze softened, just slightly. Then stay. And for the first time in her life, someone did. Weeks turned into months. The village slowly, painfully, began to change. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, fights, people who refused to believe, who clung to the old stories, who insisted that Kale was still cursed, still dangerous, still wrong. But there were others who listened. Others who began to remember the old ways, the rituals their grandparents had spoken of in whispers, the stories that had been passed down in secret, the knowledge that had been buried under fear. Kyle did not force them. She simply existed. She walked through the village with her head high. She spoke when she needed to. She helped where she could, healing the sick with knowledge the beast had taught her, blessing the crops with old prayers that tasted of earth and starlight. And slowly, one by one, people began to see. She was not a curse. She never had been. She was a bridge between the world they knew and the world they had forgotten. Roan became her shadow, not in a possessive way, not in a way that demanded anything from her, but in a way that said, I am here, and I will not leave. He helped her rebuild the sanctuary in the forest. He stood beside her when the elders challenged her. He defended her when the whispers started again. And slowly, something began to grow between them. Not love, not yet, but trust. And trust, Kale had learned, was the rarest magic of all. One night, under a sky full of stars, Kale returned to the pool in the forest. The beast was waiting for her. It looked the same as it always had. Massive, ancient, impossibly powerful. But when it looked at her now, there was something in its eyes that looked almost like pride. You have done well, it said softly. Kale smiled. I learned from the best. The beast inclined its head. The door is open again, Kale. The bridge is rebuilt. The old magic flows through the land once more. It paused. But this is only the beginning. Kale nodded. I know. There will be others, the beast continued. Other clans, other villages. Other children born under blood moons who will need to be taught, who will need to know they are not cursed. Kale's gaze was steady. Then I'll teach them. The beast's eyes burned brighter. You will be the first of a new line, Kale. The first bridgewalker in centuries. The one who holds the door open. Kale looked up at the stars, at the vast, infinite sky, and felt something settle in her chest. Not fear, not doubt, but purpose. I'm ready, she said. Years later, the village would tell a different story. They would say that the girl born under the blood moon had not been cursed at all. They would say she had been blessed. They would say she had walked into the forest and returned with the wisdom of the old gods. They would say she had saved them. Kale did not care what they said. She lived on the edge of the forest now, in a home she had built with her own hands, with Roan beside her, and the beast watching from the trees. The clan had learned to honor the old ways again, to leave offerings at the sanctuary, to stop fearing what they did not understand. And when another child was born under a blood moon, a girl with silver eyes and skin that glowed faintly in the moonlight, they did not call her cursed. They brought her to Kyle, and Kale taught her what it meant to be whole, because she had been broken, and she had been remade, and she would never let another child kneel in the snow again. She would teach them to stand, to speak, to exist without apology. And one by one, the bridges would be rebuilt. One by one, the doors would open, and the world that had been forgotten would remember.